Welcome back to America's Commercial Real Estate Show. I'm Michael Bull. This segment is brought to you by CommercialAgentSuccess.com. Check it out. It is incredible training for commercial real estate agents. Well, today we're talking with Hugh Kelly. He's a principal with Hugh Kelly Real Estate Economics. He's a CRE counselor. And we're talking about the economy and real estate and what's happening moving forward. What should we expect moving forward? And Hugh, we have the holidays coming up, right? And people are already starting to shop, and consumer spending is a big part, right, of our economy. You mentioned in the segment before, we're maybe a little over retailed on the sticks and bricks. Where are we on consumer confidence, and what do you expect there moving forward?
Okay. Consumer confidence is pretty high, and business confidence is pretty high. It's come off its peak. Peak was probably a year or 18 months ago, but it's pretty high. And I think you look for the reasons why that is. I think there are three factors that drive, particularly the consumer confidence. Business confidence we should talk about, but consumer confidence, jobs. Get a 3.6, 3.7% unemployment rate where people feel like their job is secure, that's a good thing. That makes people feel like they can spend the money that they earn.
Right.
Second, even though the stock market and the economy are not the same, it's a barometer that the general public looks at as the economy. It's not. But that's the way they look at it. And as long as we're seeing things like we've seen this week, is new records, on the Dow, on the S&P 500, that makes people feel good. It gives them confidence. And the third thing is the general sense of the news, right? And there, if you look to see why it's come down a little bit, I think it's people saying, there are things that are going on that cause me some worries. You mentioned tariffs and trade as one of them. The impeachment probably has an effect just in saying, well, what's going on? It's uncertainty. I don't know how it's going to turn out. So how does that play out in 2020?
Yeah.
I think on the jobs front, if my forecast and the CBO's forecast, more importantly, turns out to be approximately correct, that we see this deceleration in jobs from 200,000 to 125,000 and then below, then I think that has some issues on the confidence front.
Yeah.
And always the issue with stocks is it is not a tree that grows to the sky, and that's where the business confidence comes in.
Yeah.
And if you look at the National Federation of Independent Businesses Confidence Index, that has been weakening over the course of this year. If you take a look at the conference boards, look at business confidence, and more importantly, if you take a look at the National Association of Purchasing Managers indexes, and you see what's happening in terms of how much investment people are putting into their businesses. If you take a look at the impact of that on our productivity, you begin to see that the cash that's being put into our future growth is getting smaller and smaller. And that, to me, is a great leading indicator.
Yeah.
If you see business fixed investment in technology and in structures on the decline, which it is and has been, that's a sign that the economy has, that business leaders have less confidence in the economy.
Yeah. And I guess for consumer confidence, it helps too when the values are rising so much, like they are in most parts of the country. And the housing market is obviously a big part of our economy. So what do you expect moving forward there?
Housing is such a complex issue. It almost as a barbell story, right? You've got in the hottest of markets, absolutely extraordinary prices, such that it's prompted a lot of building on the luxury end in the New Yorks and the San Franciscos, but not only there. In the Dallases and in Atlanta, you see some of the product that's built here at the $1 million and up level, right? It's extraordinary. But then, in terms of the broad middle of the housing market, you've got dislocations. People who own homes, particularly homes that were built, say, during the McMansion era, they're not finding much of a market for those homes because the Gen X and then the Gen Z people not only can't afford them, without the owner taking a big loss on the sale, but they don't want them.
Yeah,
it's the wrong product.
Right.
And so we need to think about, for that middle market, building, and this is a challenge for the home builders, building the right sized product, right, with the right features for that large market. Otherwise, I think the home ownership rate, which has dropped down from 69% back into the 64% area, could go back down even lower. That's good for the multifamily sector.
Yeah.
That's good for the multifamily sector.
Yeah.
But it's not necessarily good for building wealth in the country.
Yeah.
Because that home ownership has been a great source of wealth. And then down at the other end, hundreds of thousands of Americans homeless, millions probably. And it's not just in the San Franciscos, the Seattles, the Portlands, the New Yorks, and the Washingtons. I see it in the Austins. I see it. I was in Nashville 2 weeks ago. Homeless all over the street. All over. Nashville. You see it in Denver. I don't know that much about it. Atlanta. I haven't seen it, but you would know better.
Yeah.
But this is a disease in the country that, with our affluence, we have people without a bed to sleep in.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's a disaster.
It is. And you mentioned business confidence slowing down a little bit, and you mentioned tariffs. Are the trade wars and tariffs, is that why maybe some businesses are a little more concerned about investing in their businesses? And what do those mean? What do trade wars and tariffs mean for commercial real estate? What sector might be impacted?
Well, clearly industrial.
Yeah.
Clearly logistics. And the port cities that depend upon them, and the corporate supply chain that's been built from around the world. So in a way, tariffs are almost a Fortress America kind of strategy. And they are a blunt instrument. They are not a scalpel on our problems. They're certainly not laser surgery. And probably what we need is more laser surgery in that. How has it affected the average American, the average so consumers? Should we see the persistence of tariffs into 2020 for an extended period of time? Rising prices on the imports are in effect, and so worries about inflation are another things that affect consumer confidence. Yeah. You certainly have industries that have been disrupted in terms of getting their materials into the market. So we measure largely final demand, final goods, but there are a whole series of intermediate goods right, that become part of the final product. Think of a car, right? Car is assembled at the plant, but the windows, the transmission, the engine, the seats, they're all built somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so all those intermediate goods get affected, their prices increase, and the reliability of supply chain gets so it's disruptive. I'd rather see us use a greater scalpel or laser surgery on what our trade issues are, rather than this very blunt instrument of tariffs.
And this blunt instrument of tariffs, is it short-term pain for long-term gain, possibly?
No.
No.
And I try to be as non-political as I can, because you get thrown off in economic analysis if you get too wrapped up in partisanship. But the assertion that trade wars are good and easy to win is one of the stupidest things that I've ever heard. They are not good. They're a throwback to the 19th century, to a different kind of economy, the mercantilist economy. And they are not easy to win. That's what we're finding out.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned political. So what does these impeachment hearings and kind of this tug-of-war conflict that we have politically in this country today, and then the upcoming election of 2020, what does that mean for the economy and real estate moving forward, do you think?
I'm a data guy. It concerns me a lot. And we heard this in the summaries at the end of the last of the scheduled impeachment hearings. Both sides, quote, summarizing the facts. And the list of facts had nothing to do with one another.
Right.
It was Daniel Patrick Moynihan, senator from New York, who said, you're entitled, everybody's entitled to their opinion. You're not entitled to your own facts. Right. And this is why I think the political divide is so significant, is that we've begun to disagree on what the data is that we need to look at to make our decisions.
Yeah.
That's disruptive.
Yeah.
And not only is it disruptive, it's corrosive. And so I think the path looks fairly clear at this point. The House votes articles of impeachment. The Senate does not vote to convict. And that's where we'll stand, at the end of February or so. But that doesn't mean the damage hasn't been done.
Right.
And I worry that it's hard to have a conversation about major issues. Take, for example, infrastructure. We should have long since had an infrastructure bill that improved our productivity, that put those who have not been able to find work to work on things that are productive for the economy. And we haven't, because we can't agree to talk to one another.
Yeah.
It's criminal.
Right. And that, not knowing what's going to happen, that real estate doesn't like that. Business doesn't. Uncertainty.
No, uncertainty.
Yeah, it's just
uncertainty. So, and we had kind of a mini recession in 2015 and 2016 because of uncertainty about what the election cycle was going to bring, and because of, if you remember the Republican debates, the rancor that was in there before it even got to the general election. And I think in that uncertainty, people just pull back. And I think 2020 is going to be like that in some respects.
Yeah. Well, final question for you, Hugh. Where are some opportunities then as you look forward into 2020?
You know, you a baseball fan?
Sure.
You remember a guy named Wee Willie Keeler? It's before either of us were born.
I don't. So
Wee Willie, he's in the Hall of Fame.
okay,
His motto was "Hit 'em where they ain't,"
hit them where they ain't.
and I think that's the opportunities in real estate. You know, it is to look for, even in robust markets, infill opportunities that have been overlooked. I think it is in a certain category of suburbs that in emerging trends we call hipsterbias. I don't know whether Mitch Rochelle talked to you about that, but there are some suburbs like the Alpharetta suburb that I was touring yesterday. You know, vibrant. It's vibrant. It's changing. I think that there are opportunities in that, and adaptive reuse. Adaptive reuse. You know, particularly of buildings that have great bones. Lofts that in close-in urban areas that can be used for last mile delivery. I think that's an opportunity. I think even in smaller semi-rural communities that have some of these old mill buildings. I mean, Greenville, South Carolina, a prime example of a place that's taken that opportunity. And cities that have discovered ways to reinvent themselves. And I know I said something bad about Nashville before, but Nashville's done something remarkable. I was there, and where all of the honky tonks are along Broadway. Well, I was there in the 80s. That was totally derelict.
Really?
Totally derelict.
Yeah.
As Brooklyn was totally derelict.
Yeah.
I'll tell you the truth.
Yeah.
So we can work with distress.
Yeah.
We can work with distress. So that's where I see opportunities. Again, I'll reveal my New York bias. New York had a very, very corrupt political boss named Boss Tweed, right? And he had a lieutenant who died and is buried in Brooklyn's Greenwood Cemetery. And his epitaph is, "I seen my opportunities and I took them."
All right, we'll end it on that, Hugh.
Yeah.
Thank you very much, sir.
There you go.
Great information. And thank you for joining us out there on video, on the podcast. Appreciate you listening and watching to the show. Please connect with us on your social media, favorite social media. Until next week, be sure that you always lead, learn, and laugh, and join us for America's Commercial Real Estate Show. America's Commercial Real Estate Show is brought to you by Bull Realty. For customized asset and occupancy solutions, visit bullrealty.com. Commercial Agent Success Strategies. Incredible training for commercial agents. Visit commercialagentsuccess.com.